Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and online role-playing aficionado. With this video, I will be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Destiny Abroad, the Voyage of the Rose Marie, designed by Matthew Gravelyn for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. So if you can't already tell by the title, the Voyage of the Rose Marie is a ship-based adventure. It takes place during a lengthy sea voyage. It's stated as a 2 to 3 hour adventure designed for brand new level 1 PCs, and at 11 pages you should be able to finish it within a single session, so pretty much a one-shot. It features a heavily scripted mix of role-playing, combat, and skill checks, and even has a major choice for the party to make at the end. Now, the adventure isn't really organized into chapters or acts. There are just kind of specific scenes that play out in a scripted order. So first there's a page of notes. Here it gives a little background information. Apparently there is a whole Destiny Abroad series that is planned for the future, though this adventure can easily be played as a standalone, as well as incorporated into any campaign or world that features sailing ships. So it gives some reasons for kind of why the PCs are together. Some of them might have chosen to book passage for a coin, or they're working on the ship, but in any case, your adventurers need to be already on the ship and already meant to be quite a ways into this journey. This is meant to be a pretty long journey, and spirits are restless, which will certainly play into the plot. Now, the first scene is basically a giant rat fight, which has long been made fun of as the typical cliche newbie situation to throw at level 1 RPG players. In this case, the ship's quartermaster, Aaron, approaches the players, basically shoves them into the hold, and tells them to take care of a rat problem discreetly. There are a few notes on Aaron and how to roleplay him, and even a little stat block here, I guess in case you wanted to do charisma or for some reason fight this guy. It's pretty standard. There's 3 giant rats. We're given some options on whether the rats can like drop onto the party, maybe for a surprise round, or if the players discover the rats themselves. Either way, the rats are supposed to gang up on the person with the highest AC to kind of help balance things out a bit, and it's so hard to balance level 1 player characters in D&D. My heart goes out to anybody trying to create level 1 specific adventures, because man, everybody's just got the life and defense of a wet paper bag, so that's pretty rough, and nobody wants to be killed by a giant rat. There's also some nice notes about how somebody with maybe like a sailor or pirate background would know about the ship, and then there's some information that the players would actually know these things, and the DM can tell them, like, yeah, it's pretty unusual that the quartermaster would let a bunch of nobodies into the hold to take care of the rats, but that's because, it's really bad to have rats on a ship. That's a health code violation, I'm sure. Either way, the party is supposed to know to dispose of the rat bodies after the fight. The first sentence is literally, they should probably dispose of the rats. Now, I don't like leaving something like that up to the players. I know my players wouldn't even think about it. They would wipe their hands, say job well done, and return to the quest-giving NPC. So I'd recommend Aaron specifically tell them they need to dispose of the bodies. He does mention he doesn't want anyone to know about the rats, but again, I would specifically tell my players you need to dump the rats overboard. Or a better thing would be is to maybe get them to figure out like where the rats are coming from, or if the rats damaged anything, because the whole point of this section is basically to get the players to explore further into the hold, which leads us to the next scene, which is they, I guess, find like a brig, like, cages on the ship, where a pair of would-be mutineers are currently held up. And this is kind of a neat scene. There's 2 crewmates being held captive, Tammer and Slick. This is in the surprising discovery section. And there's just a lot of little fun role-playing notes where the players can interact with these 2 and kind of figure out what has happened on the ship or what was about to happen. Slick is the confident, kind of jittery, seems like the, shifty con man, while Tamara's just kind of the big thug, brute baddie. And the whole scene is just role-playing. You're just supposed to be able to do maybe some charisma checks and figure out what's going on, but essentially they were insubordinate and maybe didn't quite do a literal mutiny, but they were kind of inspired by the first mate, Jairus Carnarvon, a great name, to be a little on the mutinous side. This is just kind of their displeasure towards the captain about being at sea so long. And all the players are supposed to do is just kind of learn this information and then return to the quartermaster to turn the quest in, essentially. And it's here that they see the next scene, which is a kind of altercation between the captain and Jarrus. The two are arguing. Jarrus storms out. This is just another role-playing only scene where the players can talk to the captain, although he downplays the argument and kind of downplays how mutinous, basically, the crew is feeling. My worry here is the PCs might feel they're not really doing anything. There's not really anything actively happening. I guess it just kind of depends on what your kind of group is. There's very much some major like role-playing moments throughout this middle section, and they need to be kind of actively participating in the story and wanting to get information about the captain, about the first mate, and all these things. And there's a little bit of information, like just kind of the bare bones. Honestly, the most information we get is about those two thugs in the brig. It was like a lot of information, whereas we don't really get much about Jarrus or the captain. And Jarrus especially feels like we need more information about like his motivations and things, because there is a big choice coming up where the players will have to choose between them. So the other weird thing is the players don't really resolve anything. Like after Jarrus leaves, the captain just kind of downplays it. They turn the quest in, and then it's like it doesn't really say like the next day, but there's just kind of the next scene is just the storm. So there's a weird transition there where I don't know what the players are supposed to be doing, and I don't know if they'll know either. You just kind of shift to the next scene, which is a little awkward. And again, I feel like this would have been a perfect opportunity, and a lot of players would probably want to go maybe talk to Jarrus and go find out, like, or talk him out, talk him down, or figure out what he's going through. And there's no information about that. There's no, it's just you're supposed to talk to the captain, and then you go to the next section, which is just a storm. Which I guess you could say, like, the storm just happens right after. If you really want to just purely scripted, just bring my players along on this very linear. I mean, they're already on a ship; they can't really, explore too much. So of course, it's gonna be kind of linear. But you could just immediately go to this next scene, which is there is a giant storm, and it kind of boils down to a skill check. I do like that the adventure encourages DMs to then encourage their players to get creative with how they handle the storm, how they want to survive it, such as lashing themselves via rope, via like rigging on the ropes for a athletics check, or just hiding down in the hold, where you're dodging boxes that are moving around with maybe like an acrobatics check or a constitution check. Just kind of come up with ways of basically hunkering down, and it's possible different players can do different things, whatever. I do like that, and that kind of helps with that outside the box thinking. And a lot of this adventure is written specifically for like newer DMs that might not. I mean, you're going to handle the mechanics and the rules of D&D, but you might not realize that, oh yeah, my players can really think outside the box when it comes to everything, whether it's combat or whether it's handling a trap situation or a hostile environment. Like, just tell me what you want to do, and I will tell you the rule for doing it. And that is like the first initial hump to get over as a new DM. And I think there's pretty good notes on like gently helping and motivating DMs to having that kind of thought process. In either case, if you fail the check, it's just kind of a slight little bit of damage, because again, these are level 1, you don't want to punish them too bad. There's fun notes about how you could even have an NPC crew member in trouble, and maybe the PCs can actually save them, which is neat. So during the storm, or I guess maybe like right when it calms down, I guess during the storm is probably when the prisoners get freed, and then I wouldn't actually have the mutiny during, or maybe you do want to have it during the storm. Maybe that's kind of an exciting like another element to it. But anyway. So Jarrus makes his move. He frees the prisoners, Tanner and Slick, which, again, our players met earlier, and then tries to take over the boat. It's a mutiny. So the PCs now have to deal with Slick and Tanner, which should be pretty fun because they already met them earlier and kind of learned about them. Maybe there was some teasing, there was some antagonizing. Maybe they learned that they can like kind of manipulate them using some successful charisma check rolls. There's some really nice opportunity for role playing here that's hopefully not going to boil down to just combat. And again, there's some good notes, I think, in the adventure that specifically say like, here's the way the party can really fuck with this. Incite them to fight each other, or at least distract them. Encourage players to come up with witty or scathing remarks for added effect. Reward success and good role playing. Yes, yes, yes. Excellent work. I'm glad there are notes in there. And again, this is specifically for new DMs. Obviously, veteran DMs would know to do that, but that's great, because the worst thing you can do at this opportunity is literally just have, hey, these prisoners you met are here, roll for initiative, and then just fight combat. That's you might as well be playing a video game for that, like a scripted video game. Like, you guys can talk to them, you can incite them to fight each other, argue, roll skill checks. Yes, the DM should absolutely encourage players to be doing this, specifically if they're a new DM and or, I guess more importantly, new players, to talk them into doing that. So that's really fun. I think this could be a really fun scene. Either way, the players will have to deal with these guys, and then they get to the climax, which is they basically make it to the main deck and find that the captain has been overpowered, at least temporarily, and currently held hostage, I guess by like knife point. I don't know if he's actually tied up or not. Turning his polished scimitar gently in his hands. Okay, he's wearing the coat and has disarmed him. Crew is tied to railings, guarded by the handful of crew. Yeah, I have read this adventure. So, and it doesn't really say how much crew there is. I think it does mention that you fight the leader and then 2 other people, so it doesn't seem like a very big crew for this boat. But anyway, so you find Jarrus is lording over the captain, and he actually gives you a choice. He says, like, hey, side with me, help take over, which I guess there's a couple crew members with weapons drawn, and there's basically, essentially, you come across this battle willing to happen, and you're given that classic choice of, like, press A to join this group and press B to join that group, or shift, like, one direction or the other. The problem is we don't know anything about Jarrus. He acts like a total dick. So this boils down to a really just like good or evil dynamic, which is kind of lame. Like, obviously, most adventuring parties are like, well, we're gonna side with the captain because he was pretty nice to us, and this Jarrus guy seems like a total dickhole. Which, from what the adventure tells us, that's the case. So unless you're particularly just kind of an evil or just rakish, chaotic party, then you would obviously side with the captain, and maybe that's just what the adventure wants to do. But then there's a whole part in the epilogue about, hey, here's what happens if the captain has been killed, and essentially the players are rewarded for either option, which that part's nice. Like, at least there's no, I'm sure there's morally right or wrong answers, but in terms of mechanics, you get rewarded either way, which that part's nice. I just don't feel like it's not really a compelling choice because we didn't really make Jarrus an interesting character, and the captain's not technically an interesting character either, but at least we talked to him. There is that scene where Jarrus storms out. You do talk to the captain, you can learn from him, and then you can roleplay him as, however. But there's no real scene where the PCs are interacting with Jarrus, so they don't really know anything about him other than when he's, acting like a dick and taking over, complaining to the captain and then taking over the ship. So that's kind of it just feels like it's a no-brainer for siding with the captain, whereas it could have been a really compelling option had we make Jarrus, like, just given his 2 cents, and maybe it was, a really interesting point of view that he had. So that's something I would definitely modify if I was just running this adventure straight, is making that character a little more interesting. So our PCs are level 1. The battle is, I believe, just between the first, only the stat block for the first mate is given. I assume if you were literally fighting the captain, you would use the same stat block as the captain, because it's up to you to decide kind of what they have. I believe you're fighting against the leader and 2 mutineers, which mutineers are basically the bandit stat, and then the leader, which is either first mate, Jarrus, or the captain. It looks like a kind of a cross between like the noble and the bandit captain stat block, so should be doable for a party. It's a big boss fight, so should be suitably epic in nature. And obviously the other team can help fight too, which is a big way of balancing, and an effective way to balance level 1 is you can have those hits go to NPCs instead of your PCs if people are really struggling. I always worry about level 1. The end, as I said, differs depending on the choice the PC's made. Either way, they're rewarded with money and safe passage off the ship and onto their destination. And the adventure continues in, I think it's mentioned, part 2 of Destiny Abroad, which I believe there hasn't been any other Destiny Abroads created yet. But either way, this adventure obviously works as a self-contained adventure if they're just on a ship. For low-level PCs, you'd have to obviously raise the CR value and the difficulty of all these situations if you have higher-level players, or you could slide into your own adventure anywhere the PCs are on a sailing ship. And I think it does an effective job of just kind of presenting a nice, good old-fashioned mutiny with, a few nice scenes. And this is not, it's 11 pages and it's level 1. It's not designed to be this big epic adventure either. So taking that into consideration, I think it does a pretty decent job. Unfortunately, and I'll get to this in my pros and cons section, there's a complete lack of visual aid. There's no maps whatsoever, and no portraits, and all the pictures are kind of just like of ships, you know, generic scenes of ships. There's this one of this coin that you get from the captain, which can mean you like earned the captain's respect, which, you know, could have use in your campaign, I suppose. But otherwise, there's no like ship maps or portraits of any of these characters, which is hugely disappointing for any adventure to have. So that's kind of a bummer. All right, let's go over quick pros and cons, followed by my final thoughts. So pros, there's lots of notes and suggestions for letting your players think of clever solutions in and out of combat. Very much, especially helping new DMs and or new players, giving them suggestions for handling, like, say, combat with charisma checks and that kind of thing. That's really good. I like that a lot. And pro, it's easy to take the seeds and structure of this mutiny and apply them to any other campaign on a sea voyage or even as a one-shot. You don't have to use even these characters. You don't have to use the specific plot beats, but just I like, you know, the concept of a mutiny and the concept that you find the insubordinate crew members like in the brig first and can talk to them, and then you see kind of the seeds unfolding. This is obviously a very quick, you know, it's 11 pages. Obviously a very quick situation, but I like that those seeds were planted here and then sprout pretty quickly. You could obviously do it and just make it longer and more drawn out, which would be interesting, and I think can be applied to a lot of different adventures and situations. Cons, there's a total lack of any maps or NPC pictures. That is a big bummer, man. Give me just even just like a crude drawing of a ship is something. Obviously, that would probably still make my con, but it would, you know, be better than nothing. And I'm somebody that primarily plays D&D on Roll20, so obviously having visual aids helps immensely and is pretty much required for any situation. I am fine building my own, and obviously there are ship ones out there, but it'd be nice to have just something more. And con, Jarrus's minions end up being more fleshed out than he is. That Slick and Tammer have all this nice information and descriptions and things, and Jarrus himself we don't really know much about, and I feel like there's really lacking a scene between Jarrus and the PCs to learn his point of view, and thus would make that final choice a little more interesting and compelling rather than basically a no-brainer that it is. So, verdict, The Voyage of the Rose Marie is a short and simple ship-based adventure featuring a fun little mutiny for level 1 PCs, though it is lacking in any maps or portraits. So thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can follow our own tabletop RPG adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.